Dr. Henry Gatianga Mwebesa is the Director General Health Services at the Ministry of Health. He has experience spanning 31 years in the health sector, having served from the level of a medical practitioner in a general hospital through all health management positions in the ministry to his current rank. In his various responsibilities, he has been involved in planning and supervising various health programs and activities at national, regional and district levels. A large section of his career was spent at the national level building quality and performance improvement systems in the health sector. Dr. Mwebesa has prolonged experience working closely with development partners, the private sector, at the government ministries and civil society organizations to strengthen partnerships with the Ministry of Health. He has directly managed and supervised a number of donor-funded projects, especially funded by the African Development Bank, USAID, Islamic Development Bank and World Bank.
Well, welcome with me, Dr. Henry G. Mwebesa. It's a pleasure having you. Good evening. Say hello to our viewers, please.
Good evening, viewers.
Thank you so much for coming. I know there is a lot that we're going to be taking into consideration in our discussion. Our hashtag is Spotlight UG, and we're powered by the Ministry of Information, Communication Technology and National Guidance. Welcome to Spotlight UG. My name is Mildred Tohaise. Now, Dr. Mwebesa, we'll start off with you. You know, after the second lockdown and the subsequent reopening, although it is in a phased manner, there seems to be a reduced discussion or attention to COVID-19, apart from the, continuous statistics that the Ministry of Health has continuously given on a daily basis. Where do we stand as a country with regard to where we are with COVID-19?
Oh, thank you very much, Mildred. And once again, good evening, viewers. Mildred, we cannot stop talking about COVID. The situation is not yet any better. Like the President said in his last address, we've gone through two phases. The first phase, you remember, October through November, December, we had a period of relaxation. Then we got a worse one, June, July, and August. And we have just recovered from that phase. And that was a bad one. It was really a bad one. We lost a lot of our colleagues, a lot of our friends, a lot of our relatives. We had very severe cases. So with that experience, you cannot stop talking, because otherwise you are opening the gate for the third phase. So and in the second phase, we lost a lot of people. You recall, in the first phase, we lost slightly below 500 people. Mm-hmm. Since the second phase, we have lost cumulative 3,162. That means from the second phase, let's say if you start from April, we have lost over 2,500 people. And you don't want to get involved in such a situation again. You cannot see that happening. So the messages must continue. We must continue harming the message to the people. We must continue telling the people about the dangers of COVID and making sure that we adhere to SOPs and avoid the third phase. Cumulatively, we have got 124,000 cases, about 124 and 039. Like I said, the second phase has been going down. We are at the bottom of the curve now, to the extent that the latest, let's say 2 days ago, we had 63 cases in a day. That's across the whole country. Remember, we are coming from a situation where we're having 1,500 cases in one day, 1,700. It kept coming down. We're averaging about 100, 120. But 2 days ago, we had 62. And when we test, you normally have an average of over 5% positivity rate, but now we are below. That 63 cases actually was a positivity rate of 1.6. I think that's the best we have had since this year began. So the situation is now a bit quiet. So I want to sound a warning that it's not a reason for relaxation.
Okay.
That means we need to hammer the point even harder so that we remain in this case, in this way of behavior, so that we keep the numbers low and possibly even control the epidemic completely. Currently, we have about 260 people admitted in all our hospitals across the country, 259 to be exact. That means all the regional referral hospitals, national referral hospitals, the public and the private. That's a good number. At one time, Mulaga alone had over 400. So I would encourage people, let's keep these numbers low, so that we all relax, we open the economy, we throw away these masks, we get vaccinated, and we move on. You talked about vaccination status. We have so far about 1.63 million people vaccinated the first dose.
Okay.
And that is about 34% of the population, the priority population, which we have been sounding very clear of the 4.8. I think everybody knows that population now, 4.8, yes. The priority population. We have only vaccinated 1.63. And of those who have had their second dose are about 568, 840. It's about 12%. So we are not yet there. In that area, we are not doing well. So and the reason why we are here today, and I think the discussions today should bring out the reasons why we should vaccinate, what we should do to vaccinate our people, and how, and why all of us should be vaccinated in order to open up our economy. I know the people who go to the bars want to go to their bars, those who want to go and play golf, the musicians who want to go and start singing again. The solution is in vaccination.
In vaccination.
Yes,
all right,
please.
maybe before we delve deeper into vaccination, Dr. Driwale, it's good statistics to be talking about vis-a-vis probably 6 months back. What would you attribute this to as Ministry of Health? Is it that the message has sunk in now? But one would say no, because this is where we are a few months before the second wave. The numbers were down, and before we knew it, the numbers had skyrocketed, and we needed to go back into another lockdown. What would you attribute these numbers to, and what do we need to do to stay here and not hit a third wave?
So, Mildred, let me just start by saying, digging deeper into who are the people, the 3,000 people whom the Director General has talked about who died so far. These are people, majority of them are 50 years and above. Majority of them have underlying health conditions, hypertension, high blood pressure, sugar disease, and so on. The categories we have been talking about as high risk, they are the ones who contributed largely to that number. So the vaccines which we are giving now, as a priority, we are giving it to this group. So should we get to the third wave, what we expect to see is if the numbers are adequately vaccinated, we expect to see less deaths.
Okay.
We expect to see less numbers of people with severe disease which will warrant admission in hospitals, which will warrant oxygen. And if the numbers are large, we expect hospitals not to be full as they have been in the last wave. So this is the drive. We need to vaccinate so that we protect the vulnerable people, with the hope that we could easily have a silent epidemic. Silent in the sense that if those who are vulnerable are protected, then you have an epidemic where people are asymptomatic, where the ambulances will run less, where oxygen demand will be low. So vaccines are a critical tool to fight this disease. And that's why we need to push harder, and why we cannot stop explaining the need. Now, the numbers you asked.
Yeah.
There are a number of factors which are at play. There are many moving parts, and it is good to tease them out. First, the reality of vaccines being scarce globally cannot be underestimated. If you can see, in terms of period, you are counting about 6 months. But in 6 months, in terms of vaccines, we have received about 5 million only. If all these 5 million doses were given, this would cover only 2.5. So it would still have less effect on what we want to do. So the availability of vaccines is the main constraint we're dealing with. The second is now the uptake. The uptake of vaccines which are already in the country has to do with the health system readiness at the subnational level. Number two, it has to do with the readiness of the target groups to embrace the vaccines. And lastly, the general community awareness about the importance of the vaccines. So far, I should say the uptake of vaccines is amazing. If I can tell you, in the last week alone, we vaccinated 92,000 people in Mukono with the Pfizer. We vaccinated 61,000 people in Wakiso and 60,000 people in Kampala. So on average, in Kampala, 10,000 people were being vaccinated last week per day. So these numbers are very telling that whereas by mouth people are saying we don't want the vaccines, actually by action the response is very good. And I think the message has sunk.
And out of your discussion earlier on, your tense was if we get into the third wave, do we say even with the vaccination a third wave is imminent, but it's only how it will be handled or the casualties that we will have that will be less? We should expect a third wave.
Yes, we should expect the third wave because the numbers of people we are vaccinating are so few. The majority are unvaccinated.
Okay.
So in terms of the vaccination averting third wave, vaccines are not the answer. It is the masks, it is the social distancing, and it is sanitizing. That is the tool we have. The vaccines are only here to help us at this stage to degrade the impact of the disease in terms of protecting people who otherwise would have developed severe disease, warranting admission, warranting oxygen, and concentrating and congesting hospitals. And that's really the battle.
That gets a little bit scary, talking about a third wave right now, but that's the reality. Like Dr. Driwale said, if you don't adhere to the standard operating procedures. Around 10th March, coming to you, Dr. Mwebesa, which was the period when we started a very fast batch of vaccination, our target was about 22 million people. We wanted to vaccinate about 22 million people of the entire population. And before we knew it, we had the numbers dwindling up to the president now saying 4.8 million, even from the 5 million earlier on. What do we attribute this reduction in number to? Is it about the availability of the vaccines, like Dr. Driwale said? Is it about the demography of our population that now we got to realize it's a smaller portion that we need to pay attention to the most than the other? What exactly?
So, Mildred, let me first emphasize what my colleague said, is that we can avoid the third wave if we adhere to SOPs. And that's really must come out very clear. Because that third wave, we can avoid it. If people behave and follow SOPs, avoid congestion, avoid crowding, and use their masks. Third wave is imminent but can be avoided. So it's important we follow the SOPs.
Okay.
Now back to your question about the projections. We projected the 22 million. That's the population above 18.
Okay.
But we are not just starting now to say the 4.8. Right from that time, 10th March when we launched down here in Mulago, our target was to vaccinate people in phases. That's the first priority group which we looked at. That's the 4.8. That's we are looking at the health workers, the estimation of 150,000, the teachers, 550,000. And when we talk of teachers, I really want to emphasize it today because it's important for the opening of schools. We are meaning teachers and all those who work in schools, cleaners, bussers, drivers, everybody who teachers and non-teaching staff. Then we looked at the security, about 250,000. And then we looked at the population above 50 years, which was about 3.34 million. And then those with comorbidities. So that prioritization has been on for right from the word go in our deployment plan, in vaccination plan. Then, and of course, the driving force was the availability of vaccines. Because if the vaccines were available, we would have said right from the beginning, everybody come, everybody around over 18 million, come and we vaccinate. But because of the low access to the vaccines, we said, let's start with the team which is very susceptible, which is at high risk. And that's how we computed the 4.8 million. Recently, actually, we have added the students who are above 18 and in higher institutions of learning. And that's 330,000, because they are also at risk because of the crowding in schools and everything.
Right there, the low access to the vaccines. Where did we go wrong? Because Parliament passed monies for vaccines to be bought, and that was earlier on in the year. Much later on, after calls and questions of when do we buy our own vaccines, that is while we had started receiving donations, is when we were told we had placed an order through UNICEF and the monies, I mean, there were no vaccines. Was it that we pushed in the monies late? Had the hoarding started much earlier on? Where exactly did we go wrong in between the money releases and when exactly we would be able to get our own procured vaccines?
Good. Actually, we never went wrong anywhere. Maybe you ask, where did the world go wrong? So the problem of availability of the vaccines across the whole world was the challenge. Because we had money, like you said, government allocated money, it's in UNICEF, it's available, but you couldn't access the vaccines. You'd make an order and you couldn't get the vaccines.
And then we were focusing on AstraZeneca first.
Yes, we were focusing on AstraZeneca because of the services that we have in the country. Because AstraZeneca fits very well within our cold chain system. As you know, in this country, we have built a very strong immunization program for the childhood immunizable diseases. And the same system is very adequate for AstraZeneca vaccines. When you look at these other vaccines like Pfizer, Moderna, they require temperatures which go up to minus 80 degrees, minus 70 degrees. But AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson is ideal within 2 to 8 degrees centigrade, which is the same temperature in which we keep our routine vaccines for immunization of our children. And that capacity is there in the country. Very big capacity, actually. We have a capacity of storing over 300 million doses. We need almost 50, capacity of 50 million doses for our routine vaccination of children. So there's excess capacity for 2 to 8 degrees centigrade. Okay. And in that case, we could comfortably accommodate AstraZeneca. But of recent, we have also built capacity. That's why you see we have Pfizer now. That's why you see we have Moderna. But that was a recent innovation. We had to buy fridges which can accommodate, like Pfizer, which we can store at minus 80 degrees centigrade. We can store Moderna at between minus 15 and minus 25 degrees centigrade. We have that capacity now. But earlier in March, we didn't have that capacity. This capacity was built since around July, August.
Okay. So we now have the new technology to store the others.
We can store over 5 million doses of Pfizer, can store over 20 million doses of Moderna.
Okay. Yes. Dr. Driwale, even with a few vaccines that have come through that are donations over 5 million, whereas we've talked about, you know, the numbers, vaccinating about 60,000 just in the last week, and you said what is said and the action are totally different, we still see a slow uptake of vaccination. And many a times, probably now, the vaccination and uptake is coming more pronounced because the schools need reopening and that was tagged to vaccination. I mean, the night economy needs reopening and that was tagged to vaccination. So it's just conditional that people are coming to get vaccinated, but most probably they weren't willing at the onset. What do you attribute this low uptake to?
So humans by nature require incentives to respond. So if the incentive is tagging it to opening of schools, opening the social or the economic space, so be it. But the point is that this is a new vaccine against a new disease, and there's a lot of information freedom, and people get caught up. Those who do not have alternative access to credible information get caught up. And the good thing in Uganda is that we have moved far. There are partners, civil society, who have been monitoring the acceptance of vaccines over time.
Okay.
And I can tell you the worst spots in Uganda were in Kampala and Mbarara. But as I speak now, they have caught up with the rest of the country, and vaccine acceptance is at 80%. So I would discount the notion that people do not want the vaccines from the debate. The 20% continue to ask questions. That is the opportunity for them to understand better. So our work is to continue giving them the information they need so that they make informed decisions about their health. So the uptake of vaccines, the challenges we are getting are, as I enumerated earlier, issues to do with the health system readiness, particularly the primary health care infrastructure, the readiness of the target groups, and the readiness of the general public to respond. Because if the target group is 50 years and above, then a person who is 30 should see it as his responsibility to encourage the older person. Someone is 80 and is alone. So it calls for support to these people in that group if they have any limitations. Because the responsibility comes to all of us.
Okay.
And you can see why the last lockdown was basically because the numbers were many, the system was not beginning to cope. So the only way to do was to lock down so that you interrupt transmission and numbers keep going down and the health system copes.
Okay.
So they play the role vaccines play in protecting the health system in order to cope with the pandemic. For me, is the issue to emphasize, and we cannot tire from it and keep encouraging people the way we have done. Now the response is good, so we just need to fix the loose ends, and we continue vaccinating our people.
All right, Dr. Mwebesa.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
Unfortunately, one of the driving forces was the death. When we went through the second wave,
Okay.
unfortunately, we lost a lot of our people. Then people said, oh, it seems the problem is serious. Where is the vaccine? So people rushed for vaccination. Many people changed their mind. And that's when you saw numbers swarming our vaccination points to get vaccinated.
Let me take you a little bit back to the 4.8 million that the president hinges on for reopening of the economy, full reopening. How realistic is this number when from March to probably August or September, we are now in October, we've vaccinated less than 11.9% of those have taken their 2 jabs, right? We've vaccinated less than 2.5 million people who've taken at least one of the jabs. And we are saying we need in these 3 months to have vaccinated 4.8 million people. And you are right here both talking about the scarcity of the vaccines. How realistic then are we talking about these figures?
Can I assure you, Mildred, like my colleague,
And the Ugandans watching.
and the Ugandans watching us today, from March through to maybe August, September, our biggest problem was getting the vaccines. Like we talked about having money and having no vaccines. From today, or from March to September, especially in September, we have really got a big number of vaccines, especially through the COVAX facility, through our partnership with multilaterals, with COVAX.
We said donations. We call those donations.
Donations. The total number of vaccines we've received, I think we said it earlier,
Yeah.
5.2.
Yes.
That, of course, gives us about 2.6 million. Between October and December, we are expecting another 4.7, I think, I can cross-check, 4.95, that's about 5 million. But all in all, by December, we shall have about 12 million doses of vaccines, which are assured, including the vaccines bought by a government, especially through Johnson & Johnson and Sinopharm, which is a vaccine which is produced in China. So in terms of availability of vaccines between now and December is not a problem. We are going to be counting on 12 million doses. If you are talking of 12 million doses, and that has Johnson & Johnson, which we are getting, is it 1.2 million? That's 1.2 million people vaccinated because it's a single dose. Then the rest is 2 doses. So in average, you are going to have over 6 million people vaccinated.
Okay.
So the 4.8 million can be achieved and should be achieved. Now the point is to intensify mobilization and asking people to come to get vaccinated.
All right.
The issue of vaccines is not an issue up to December. And we have pipeline vaccines even after December for more vaccines to come in 2022, which should cover us up to 22 million people which we are targeting.
All right, Dr. Riwale, still about the 4.8 million, because that seems like our salvation for reopening the economy. Now, because it's reopening fully is hinged on vaccination, it has now turned into mandatory vaccination. And yet at the beginning of vaccination, it was, if I am willing to get vaccinated, I come. And I had to even sign a consent form. So why do I sign a consent form when I'm literally being forced? Because we've seen organizations that are saying without vaccination, you have no job. Without vaccination, we've seen leaders who are saying without teachers being vaccinated, do not expect your job back. But we know health-wise, I could have a choice to take the vaccine or not.
Yeah, this goes back to the public health principles. When you are talking about a public health issue, what I do affects other people. And therefore, it is in the interest of the broader public that some of your freedoms have to be sacrificed. And it works like that. That's why if you drive on the right, you will create injury. And the police is spending time regulating us who are educated on the roads. So the choice of whether you take vaccine or not will have a problem for others. For example, if someone does not take the vaccine when he is at high risk and he falls sick, when he is in Mulago spending 3 million shillings per day, whose money is it? That is taxpayers' money. So politely, when you are reminded that you are at high risk
forced, not reminded. You're told you will have no job. And Dr. Riwale, sorry to interrupt you. Remembering that many of these vaccines are still under study. Because of COVID-19, there is a lot of technology that had to be developed. That is the very reason why we had to sign consent forms, that in case of any adverse effects, the government is not liable. Now you're forcing me to get vaccinated. What if?
Probably the word force is too strong. Because it is a standard practice, any sacrifice you make to take the vaccine, which is under emergency use listing, is part of your responsibility to the public health.
Okay.
And diseases like Ebola, which almost crippled the economies in West Africa, was contained using vaccines which were under emergency use listing. So these practices of consenting for a vaccine which is under emergency use listing is not new. So that's why we continue. But the information is clear. These are vaccines which have gone through all the necessary tests, and that should not be the problem. That shouldn't be the problem, because the bigger public health, the bigger public good is what we are protecting. Say the education of the children, the economy in general, and our social and economic life is critical. And the vaccines are now proved to be safe. That's why the language is beginning to change, because now it is known. In Uganda, we have vaccinated over 2 million people at least with one dose.
Yes.
They are safe. I have completed my vaccination. It's safe.
Okay. Dr. Mwebesa, let's still come back to that number. And I'm sticking to it because that is what everyone is looking forward to have the economy entirely reopened. And many are asking, what is the scientific explanation of having, for example, the bars closed and, concerts closed, but you have a mall that is open that has thousands of people flocking in and out at different times? What is the difference between the two areas? They all have crowds.
Okay. Well, we are still at vaccinating the 4.8. Mildred, are you fully vaccinated?
Yes, I am fully vaccinated.
Thank you very much. So, in the malls, we expect people to go there, and we have put in place mechanisms working with the leaders in the malls, working with KCCA, with the city authorities, to make sure that standard operating procedures are followed and adhered to strictly. In the bars, it may be a bit difficult at this time to control the people who are going to get merry and what and dance around and shout around. The control in a mall is different from the control in a bar. That's why the scientific committee looked at the different sectors and evaluated the risk analysis, did a risk analysis of the different sectors. If you are in a bar, what is the risk with respect to COVID-19? Mm-hmm. If you are in a church, what is the risk? Especially looking at the risk and possibility of adhering to standard operating procedures. If you are in a mall, if you are, let's say, in a film hall, cinema hall, which are the areas which can be crowded but can be controlled. So we did a risk analysis, and that's how the government opened some areas and left some areas closed as they are getting monitored, on the understanding that the risk in those areas is still higher than in other places. For instance, the church. We allowed many people, like up to 200. Mm-hmm. But you know the churches, you can manage and can control them. You go to functions, let's say an organized wedding, you can control 200 people. As long as they are done with their wedding by 7 o'clock and they go home. But in a bar, where you can't control people who are excited, people who have put in 4 or 5 bottles of beer, then it becomes a bit difficult. In a cinema hall, where you have all crowded people, rooms closed, you are using AC, the risk analysis was higher. So it was really done scientifically, looking at each sector and the risk of spread of the disease or the risk of adhering to SOPs.
Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Driwale, what have you put in place to ensure that the 4.8, it's one thing for the vaccines to come, it's another for all of them to be utilized at the end of the day. Dr. Mwebesa talked about over 4 million that we do expect between now and December. Anything you're putting in plan as Ministry of Health to ensure that these vaccines will be taken up by the people? What are you going to do different from what you're doing right now?
Right. Maybe it is good to remind ourselves on how the health system in Uganda is constructed to vaccinate people. As Ministry of Health, we mobilize the vaccines, we mobilize the resources which are required, and we pass them over to the local governments. The people who vaccinate, who inject, that's now not Ministry of Health in direct terms. Mm-hmm. That is the district local governments. So the districts serve people through sub-counties, parishes, and villages using the local health facilities. That is the structure we use. Either they run these vaccination activities as static within the health facility, or they move out to the community, and the local community mobilizes those who are eligible to converge on that outreach post. And that is how we are reinforcing that model. And if you see in Kampala, Wakiso and Mukono, what we did was to create vaccination points in large places where a number of vaccination teams sit in one place so as to cope with the numbers. in one division here, for example, we have four vaccination sites in every division, so that you reduce the distance for the people who are in the priority groups to move. We have also seen that the enthusiasm from the people who are not in that age group is also high, and we have not been sending people away. But the point is that the people who are in that group are critical for the greater good of opening the space, the socio-economic space, and they have to be targeted. So the message still remains that the mobilization should not be left to the healthcare workers. We are involving the district leaders, political leaders, technical leaders. We are involving community resource persons, the LCs, the village health teams, and civil society and volunteers to mobilize the community, as you saw in Kampala, for people to leave wherever they are and converge on that vaccination point. In that way, the vaccines will be consumed fast, and in that way, the services are nearer to the people, and this is the model which we are reinforcing.
All right. For purposes of clarity.
And you, the press,
yes,
you're also doing a good job for us, and we really appreciate. I also wish to add that the Interreligious Council, we have worked very closely with the religious leaders, and they are doing a very good job. And you know, they really talk to their people every Sunday and every Friday, and those on Saturdays. So the religious leaders have also done a very good job in mobilizing the community. The cultural leaders, we have talked to all the cultural leaders across the country, in the different regions. They have also mobilized the community for us. And we'll continue to intensify this, because really now the vaccines are here. The next step is to mobilize people to
take them up.
Take the uptake.
And talking about uptake, for clarity, first of all, many are asking, when you say 4.8 million people vaccinated, is it both jabs or at least one of the jabs for the 4.8 million to have full or reopening of the economy?
Mildred, I want to assure you that we want 4.8 who have been fully vaccinated. And I've assured you the vaccines are there. So
and we have a span of about 12 weeks.
Between now and December. That's 12 weeks, yes.
But the vaccines are still going to come in particular batches, and you want people fully vaccinated
the vaccines
by December.
Are here. Vaccines are here. Well, now we have already 5.28.
That's 2.5 million people about
yes.
there.
And before the end of October, we are getting in about 3 million. And that includes Johnson and Johnson.
About 1.5.
Johnson & Johnson is 1 dose per person, remember? That's 1.2 million people.
How many doses of Johnson & Johnson do we expect?
1.2 million.
1.2 million.
And those are vaccines paid for by government of
And
Uganda.
that is within which period of time? This very month of
This
October?
very month, October, which we have started.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
and in the
you
same
need
month, we are expecting Sinopharm, also paid for by government, which is coming through COVAX facility.
So you need 4.8 million fully vaccinated, not one dose, not one jab, especially for those who are taking the 2 jabs.
Fully vaccinated.
Fully vaccinated, and it is good to start now. Because if we are not fully vaccinated by 30th of December, it will complicate decisions. So the better you start now, the better. And that is the move.
And when you talk about complicating decisions, I know that it's a Ministry of Health that advises the president. But let's look at the vaccines themselves. What's the difference, first of all? Because earlier on, there was skepticism on AstraZeneca, many saying, oh, it was a trial vaccine and all that. We now have Pfizer, we have Moderna, we have Sinovac, and we're waiting for Johnson & Johnson. Is there any difference if I take AstraZeneca or take Johnson & Johnson or eat any of the vaccines? What's the difference, Dr. Dwiwale? If you could elaborate.
Now, let me explain. For a vaccine to work, it requires a particle on the disease-causing agent which stimulates your immune system, right? The defense system of the body.
So now, for the layperson, is that what they're saying? So they inject you with the coronavirus itself?
Not the virus itself, but a related product.
Okay.
Yes. So if for example, I said the nail, yes, or the hair of my hair, if it is in you, then it is a particle from my body which can stimulate the immune system of the other. So let's not go that direction. A particle from the disease-causing agent is what is required to start the immune response. Now, in the COVID situation, the particle, what they call, there is a particle called the S protein, which is needed to start that exercise in the body. Now, the vaccines which we are using, regardless of its type, all of them work through either directly presenting the S protein in the vaccine or stimulating your body to produce the S protein, which then starts the immune response. So at the end of the day, all the antibodies which are produced against the S protein. So what does this mean? It means functionally the vaccines are all the same.
Okay.
What varies is how the S protein is presented. So the body will react to the S protein, and in terms of fighting the disease, they will all be effective. So the difference is how the S protein, which stimulates the immune system, is derived. But in terms of how it prepares your body to fight the disease, it is the same, because they are antibodies against the S protein.
All right. Now, talking about vaccines, for example, Johnson & Johnson will be taken once, one dose, and you are done. But let's talk about a cross-section of the public that's asking about combinations of different vaccines. I used AstraZeneca. By the time I'm ready for my second vaccine, probably there is no AstraZeneca available. It's a Pfizer or it's a Moderna or whichever other vaccine that is available. Are there any studies that have been done about vaccine combinations, and which ones can those be?
So there are a number of studies which are ongoing on about mixing of vaccines, and some have already made conclusions of mixing one type with the other. But for us in Uganda at this stage, we would not want to complicate the vaccine deployment by beginning to switch and mix them. Our guidance is that if you start with the vaccine A, finish with A. If you start with the Pfizer, we have preserved doses for second dose for Pfizer. If you start with AstraZeneca, you finish with the AstraZeneca. You see, it is the S protein we are talking about, but how the S protein is presented to you. If your body reacted very well to AstraZeneca, why would you want to take chance with another vaccine to whom you are not exposed before? So I think the best at this point, until we're advised by this scientific committee here, is you start with AstraZeneca, finish with AstraZeneca, Pfizer, finish with this Pfizer, and we also advise those who started with the Sinovac to wait for Sinovac, which we are receiving this week.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Mwebesa, let me come to you still on vaccine combinations, which is still a discussion among many. And I also want you to pay attention to issues of some of the people who have probably refused to take up the vaccination, but now there is information of fake COVID-19 vaccine certificates on the market. Have you heard about those in the media reports?
Fake COVID-19 certificates?
Exactly. Vaccine certificates, because after my vaccination, I receive a certificate.
Yes.
But the people who don't want to get vaccinated and they're selling out fake certificates.
At Nasa Road?
Exactly.
Yeah, but we have a database in the system. So the people at Nasa Road, will they put you in our database? Because we will verify. And actually, I want to sound this same warning too, because I've heard that, especially the teachers. Of course, many others, but the teachers have been allegations, because I haven't confirmed it, that they were buying certificates so that when the schools open, they'll come and show his certificate, which maybe he has bought from Nasa Road, and say, I'm vaccinated. Mm-hmm. So we have capacity to verify in our database that Mwebesa, I hold a certificate, I was vaccinated on May 10th, and then they will check, Mwebesa, you are a teacher of Nakasero Primary School, but in the database of the Ministry of Health, you are not there, much as you carry this certificate. So that becomes even a criminal offense. So we shall hold you liable. You will even show us who gave you that certificate and how you got it. But I want really to encourage people to take the vaccination. It is safer for you. It is better for you. There's no point going and buying a paper because you are hiding. You are lying who now? You are lying yourself because it's your life. It is between you and your life. So there's no point to go and buy a fake certificate when actually you need to be protected yourself.
That now takes me to the discussion of data entry. If you are saying the Ministry of Health has all the data that is needed, why has it become seemingly more harder for people, for example, who have lost their cards to take their second jab? Because that is one of the prerequisites for you, for example, to take your second jab. You need your certificate for the first jab. Many have probably misplaced them or lost them, and it becomes hard for them to take the second jab. Is it hard to dig through the data and be able to confirm that I actually took the jab this particular date and I can take my second one?
Because if you lost your card, then you can come with your NIN, National Identification Card, or any identification you used, and then we can go back in the system and can find out. Let's say if you can't trace your card, but you have your national ID, and your NIN was entered properly, then we can trace back and find that Mwebesa was vaccinated in Mulago on 10th March.
Dr. Mwebesa, that doesn't seem to be the situation with many who are getting vaccinated, and these complaints have been received severally across different vaccination centers. Where could the problem be?
Unless people didn't, unless their NINs were not entered properly, or people didn't have national identification cards. But also I think we use telephone number. Can't we retrieve with telephone number?
Telephone number.
Yes.
But the experience which she's alluding to has to do with the cases where the backlog of data which remains on hard copy. Mm-hmm. If you are vaccinated, your record is kept in a register, and after the vaccination exercise, it is now entered into the electronic system. And if there is a backlog of numbers of people who are vaccinated, but their data is not yet uploaded, when you come after your phone is your card is lost, then getting your number, your certifying your vaccination status will require that you do not go straight into the line. First, you lost your card, so you have to be honest, go back to where you were vaccinated, have that verified from the register, and then your data is updated, and then you present yourself.
So you go back to the register physically,
yes,
and look back in
yes,
the data.
Just
but you're vaccinating 10,000 people a day. Those are, lots of numbers.
In case you lose your card, that is the route. Because the alternative is someone who is not vaccinated will say, I lost my card. So there will be a lot of confusion. So take your time. When the health workers are not vaccinating, go and verify your vaccination status, get it from the register. We have guided many like this. That's what they have done. You are given an alternative card, then you go and complete your vaccination status. So this is to sound that the cards are a very essential asset which you have to keep in order to keep the track of your vaccination.
That's why I would ask, how often does the Ministry of Health then get to back up from physical to electronic databases? Because if I am coming for my second jab, that's about 12 weeks after. Now, if my information is not uploaded, not to say that I am supporting people who are reckless to lose their cards, but if after 12 weeks accidentally I can't find my card, but also can't find my data electronically, isn't there a problem, Dr. Driwale?
Definitely there is a problem. Perhaps let me also emphasize, this is what happens at the district level. So you go to your facility where you got the vaccination and have that sorted with your health facility to ensure, because your information can also be got from the district level. So instead of crowding at the ministry, You will lock the technical teams doing personal care work at the headquarters. So you move to the facility where you are vaccinated. If the data cannot be retrieved, then you will resort to the hard papers. But this is just to say, by losing your card, you are tripling work on other people. So you need to take it more seriously and take care of your card very well.
How do you date back? Maybe before you come in, Dr. Mwebesa, Dr. Driwale, you know that there are organizations that are making it simpler for their employees to get vaccinated. In such an instance, doesn't it become hard if someone is taking on a second vaccine to be able to know which particular book was I registered in while doing my vaccination at first?
So it's not easy. The point I'm emphasizing is it's a challenging.
Be responsible.
Yeah. Be responsible.
And keep your
while
card.
On our side, we are working on that, but individuals should be responsible for this critical information they have.
Thank you.
But I want to agree with the Mildred. He raised a very good point. Between the first dose and when I come for my second dose, we are talking of 3 months. 12
yes.
weeks. We've been having that problem, and we've been discussing it at the Ministry of Health. So actually, within those 3 months, we should have built capacity for all this data to be in the system. Because if I vaccinated in March and I'm coming in June and my information is not yet there, then that is a gap on our side.
Okay.
But we have been working with our partners, especially to get people to support the district with IT people, IT support teams, to make sure that we enter that data. There was a backlog at the beginning, quite a lot, but I think the situation now has improved a lot. Most of the information is put in. I notice people who have a little more challenges is where the names were not copied properly. Okay. You find instead of writing a 7, maybe somebody wrote it as a 1, and then we get problems there. But otherwise, in terms of entering the data, we notice that as a challenge, and I think going forward, it should be addressed, because 3 months is really a lot of time to update that information.
All right. And to our viewers, whereas the Ministry of Health would acknowledge that there is more that needs to be done, like Dr. Driwale says, please take responsibility for your card and keep it safe, and make sure that by the time you take your second jab, you have all the information that you need to take that vaccination. Don't give people a lot of work to do just because you were reckless or you were not very much careful. We'll be taking a very short break, and when we do return, Spotlight UG as well continues to focus on aspects of vaccination. At the end of the day, many of you are asking, I felt sick, I had COVID-19, I recovered. After how long do I need to take a vaccination? Am I not immune to COVID-19 after getting it at the end of the day? That and many more questions is what we'll be answering in our second phase when we do return for Spotlight UG.
I smile when I think of you, Uganda, my home. My home, I dance when I look at you, Uganda, my home. Oh, my Uganda.
I know with you I'll always stay forever. I know, because I feel that we belong together. My home. On my heart, mommy, oh my Uganda.
Hey, mama.
At MTN, we look forward to starting another exciting journey together to grow our home, Uganda.
Getting GoTV was the best decision James has ever made. Finding a good place to watch football was never easy, but it was costly. Until James discovered something big. Now he can finally enjoy the benefits of homegrown advantage with a decoder and 1 month of GoTV value. For just 25,000 shillings, enjoy the world's biggest leagues and cap competitions. GoTV Uganda. Love it.
You know, you could just buy a new smartphone from anywhere in Uganda. Dial *175 *94 hash to activate a 100% double data bonus offer on weekly or monthly bundles for 3 months. Better yet, you automatically receive free 1 GB valid for 30 days. You are hooked already, aren't you? Enjoy a 100% double data bonus from Airtel. Buy a smartphone from anywhere in Uganda and insert an Airtel SIM card. Dial *175 *94 hash to activate a 100% data bonus offer on weekly or monthly bundles, valid for 3 months. Dial *175 hash and select your preferred bundle to activate a 100% data bonus offer on weekly or monthly bundles, valid for 3 months. Airtel, the smartphone network.
Vaccinated today so we can get closer to the normal way of life. Echa COVID-19 chija kugwa.
Uganda, today is a great day to work towards your dreams. Dial *185 *7 hash and select savings to save as low as 500 Ugandan shillings on regular savings or 250,000 Ugandan shillings for fixed deposits. Airtel Money Super Saver is powered by KCB Bank Uganda. Airtel Money, instant, secure, borderless. T's and C's apply.
A program. It's not a Ministry of Health vaccination. It's a vaccination for us all, and we need to take it up. Remember, the number is 4.8 million. Now, Dr. Henry Mwebesa clearly stated it. It's not just 4.8 million vaccinated, 1 or 2. It is fully vaccinated, and that is when decisions will be taken on whether there can be a full reopening of the economy. 4.8 million by December. But we've also been told that by October's, probably in this particular month, we expect 1.2 million doses of Johnson & Johnson. And remember, with that, you can only be able to take 1 jab. But over 4 million vaccines will be received this particular time. Johnson & Johnson will be the 5th vaccine category added to us on top of AstraZeneca, Sinovac, Moderna, as well as Pfizer, which we so far have in the country. Still with me on Spotlight, we do have Dr. Henry Mwebesa, who is the Director General Health Services at the Ministry of Health, and we also do have Dr. Alfred Duale, who is the Assistant Commissioner Health Services, Vaccines and Immunization. Of course, many of you are asking about Dr. Diana Twine. We did expect to have her much earlier on, but because of a number of duties that she has to perform, unfortunately, she couldn't make it to the show. But nevertheless, we do continue with this. Now, as we went into the break, we were talking about responsibility, especially for vaccines, I mean for cards that were lost and people who need to take on their second dose. Maybe Dr. Duale, this was coming in from social media. One was asking, am I able to use my scanned copy of the card to be able to take my second jab?
Absolutely. If you come with the scanned copy, which is genuine, and we use that information even to check if you're in the system, you should be vaccinated.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Dr.
And maybe we should then encourage people to take pictures of their cards and keep it on phone.
So
that's a good idea, actually.
That's a good idea. Yeah. But let me also just touch on this. Yesterday, there were actual arrests made in the airport because some people were forging the electronic certificates. What we are seeing here are cards, but the actual electronic certificate is different. And there were people who had forged it, and when it was put to test by the immigration authority, the airport authority, it failed the test.
Okay.
So, and now I think it is a different course of action.
Maybe, and that's where you need to differentiate. We were earlier talking about vaccination cards for the first dose. After the second dose, what more do I get? Do I still just get a registration at the end of the day? Do I get the electronic card that you were talking about? Elaborate more on that.
So the card which is given to you, that white card, is to help you to remind you about your dates. Now that card, information on that card is in a register. So from the register, it is now uploaded onto the electronic system. Now, once you feed all the information required for the electronic system, it now generates for you an electronic certificate which can be globally read with the QR codes, and all your information will come from there. So it's the one which we actually call certificate. But this one is a vaccination card.
Yes.
So if you forge it, it really is inconsequential. But the electronic one is the one which matters. And you really need to be careful to start forging it, because there are security features which are inbuilt, which your forger will not know, and it can land you into problems.
Okay. Dr. Mwebesa, you had an additional clarification to make to that about the cards and the certificates themselves. Anything more that the public needs to know? And also, apart from just the national ID, what more, if I am coming for my vaccination, do I need to come with? Because we know that some Ugandans up to now do not have their national IDs. We also have non-Ugandans who are taking up their vaccines, because even the government of Uganda, with our open policy for refugees, even those who are living in settlement camps are as well taking up their vaccines.
Very good. It's very important that we clarify this as well. If you don't have a national identification card, you can come with a passport if you have a passport. You can come with a driving permit if you have a driving permit. Refugees can come with their, I think they have refugee cards. And of course, expatriates and who come with their passports. But in the event that you don't have all those, you can even come with a letter from LOC to show that you are a citizen or you are Ugandan, you live here. And
wouldn't a follow-up on that become a little
yes,
harder?
now the challenge is, how do we register this? As your telephone number? How do we register this? I think we'll use more of your telephone number into the system, and the retrieval will be more of your telephone number. So I want to believe those with telephone numbers must have national identification cards.
But doctor, and that's a great discussion.
Yes.
But yes, I have a telephone number. I don't have a national ID, and my telephone number was registered probably in with my mother's NIN. So that means if you are going to trace, yes, you will have my telephone number, but the NIN is of a totally different person.
Yeah, now you're bringing a complicated situation.
The tiebreaker will be the name.
The name. But you remind me of the issue to emphasize to our health workers who are listening to us today, that we should not turn away a person because he doesn't have a national identification number. And I want to repeat this. Don't turn away somebody who has come for vaccination because he doesn't have a national identification number. You must use all ways possible to identify the person and vaccinate that person that day. Don't let him or her go back.
I think that's great. Dr. Drew earlier on was talking about a certificate, and we're going to display to you what the COVID certificate, the vaccination certificate, I beg your pardon. That on the screen is the vaccination certificate. What you have much earlier on is the card. Now, Dr. Drew, I want to get back to the discussion Dr. Mwebesa had much earlier on. We want to vaccinate everyone who is willing. But the identification and capturing of this information for further usage, isn't that going to become harder for the ministry? If capturing information of lost cards after a long period of time is problem enough, how about I only have an LC letter and my number at the end of the day, and I want to get vaccinated. At the end of the day, I will need a certificate.
So the certificate will have your name. Even if it has the telephone number of somebody else, it helps to retrieve the information from the system. But the fact that your name is your name, and you used a
Dr. Driwale, I've met so many Mildred to Hises, at least more than 2.
But we will not have the same telephone number.
And Mildred to Haise, who is linked to the telephone number of Driwale Alfred, who is the LC1 of Mugoba. So I think there is a point where, and also the vaccination location, the district where you're coming from. So I think the real point to emphasize is that having a national identification card is very important.
True.
It saves you these headaches and inconveniences. But to accommodate people with various needs, we are now trying to take this path that you get a chaperone who can sponsor you at the vaccination point, and some of your information is linked to the person who introduced you.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Mwebesa, let's get to the deployment of the Ministry of Health deployment mechanism for the vaccines. While some districts have an uptake in 1 week or 2 weeks, the vaccines are depleted. Some districts will probably even have some vaccines almost coming to an expiry. Just this morning, our bureau chief in one of the regions was reporting about Obongi district having some thousands of vaccines that were almost due for expiry and hadn't been used at the end of the day. What mechanism do you use to deploy these vaccines? Is it about numbers? Is it about uptake? What exactly do you use?
If you realize the vaccines we've been having, they were really small numbers. So we are giving districts according to the needs, but really they were much less than what they should even be getting. We are giving a district like Kampala about 100,000 or 200,000 doses now. But before that, we actually, the first batch, we gave them 50,000 doses.
Okay.
You can imagine that was not adequate. Now, we are giving a little more, depending on the population and the required doses. But going forward, now that we have adequate vaccines, we shall compute what is required for each district, and we'll giving each district the required vaccines. But the question you asked, how do we mobilize for consumption of the vaccines that we have given there? You have realized that we have intensified the mobilization, and recently even the president added on this, that this is not the role of the district health team alone. It's not the role of the DHO alone. Mm-hmm. It's the role of the RDC, it is the role of the COW, the district leadership, the elected political leaders, plus our health team. And even now, the district education officer and all the district health, the district executive committee. So all the districts must mobilize their populations to come for the vaccination. Mm. The next point I also wanted to emphasize is that, of course, it's a learning process. Initially, we sent the vaccines to the health facilities, and we thought people would come and take vaccines, like we did for measles, like we did for DPT and the like. So we'll say Health Center 3 Kinoni, people will come there. But it didn't work. So now what we have realized, I think we have gone for more for a campaign mode, and outreaches. And districts have been facilitated to do that. So with the vehicles, with the fuel, with the allowances for staff. So what we are doing now is to make sure the team the district leaders mobilize the population, the health workers move out and go to areas where the population is and vaccinate them. Tomorrow they go to another place to vaccinate them. But the important thing is that you mobilize the people, tell them tomorrow we are coming to Kabwangasi, and people wait, and you go and vaccinate them.
Okay.
We have done the same approach in Kampala, send teams to Chukubo, send teams to Tax Park, send teams to churches, mosques on a Sunday, on a Friday, and they wait for people as they come out of church with our reliable religious leaders. They would already have told the people who came in church, the congregation, as soon as they get out, they get their jab. Or as soon before they enter, they get their jab. So the approach is changing a bit, from more from the static where people were routinely walking in to more of a campaign mode. And with that, we are seeing a more uptake and less. We actually don't have any vaccines which are expiring. The vaccines which were due to expire were expiring on 30th September, but all that batch was finished. The current vaccine stock we have is going up to December, and all of those we hope will be finished, especially with this mode that we have adopted.
All right. A key question, Dr. Duale, that comes in from especially the COVID survivors is, I had COVID, I recovered, that means I have an immunity. Do I need to get vaccinated? And if so, after how long from recovery date?
Now, vaccines, the quantity to be given is calculated to stimulate your immune system enough. But if you are infected naturally, that kind of immunization is not calculated. So you cannot say the amount of immune response was this and it is adequate to protect, and you conclude. You will be making a very risky decision. So what we do is that if you get infected and you have recovered, you are now partially immune. Probably we could say you have got your first dose. You come back for your first dose after 3 months. Between 3 to 6 months, you're safe. So you come back at 3 months and take your jab. And that's the period we recommend. If you want to take it earlier than that, it should be a special consideration based on your full recovery and your health. But we recommend 3 months.
All right. Earlier on, we talked about when our purchased vaccines will be coming through, and Dr. Mwebesa did answer on that. But we know Parliament has done quite a number of releases, not only for vaccine purchase, but also to be able to deal with the entire health sector. And earlier we were discussing about an imminent third wave. What so far, Dr. Mwebesa, and I come to you, what so far have we done much more than where we were in the second wave? Because in the second wave, we had aspects of oxygen not being available, capacity in terms of the human resource, but also the bed capacity available. Have we made any strides? And if so, which ones are those during this period?
Okay. First of all, let's continue from vaccination.
Exactly. We will definitely continue with that.
We are paid for vaccination. Vaccines, the Johnson & Johnson.
Yes,
we are purchasing vaccines.
Is that all? Is our money only purchasing 1.2?
Mildred. I'm
Okay.
continuing. We are paying for Sinopharm vaccines through the COVAX facility. They are coming. I already told you by the end of October we are getting 2 million. It is true, during the second wave, first of all, we need to emphasize that the second wave was stronger than the first wave. Two, it was more serious, in that in the first wave you'd have patients who are coming in with mild to moderate, majority. In this case, we had many cases coming in with severe to critical, including even young people. So it overwhelmed our system more than we had anticipated, and required more admission, required more acute intensive care facilities, it required more evacuation. So as government, I don't want to say ministry because it has been a multi-sectoral approach, government has put in a lot of support or financing to improve the capacity of the health sector to respond to this. I don't want to say when we get a third phase because I don't want it. But in the unfortunate event that it comes, we have increased the bed capacity in this country. We had about 4,100, but now our bed capacity is going to, we are adding another 10,000 beds. That will make it over about 14,000 beds. We have increased oxygen. There was a big outcry of oxygen, you recall, that we had to run to the private sector. We had to run here and there to get the oxygen. We had prepared for oxygen. We had increased the capacity of Mulago for the first wave. We had repaired the oxygen plants in regional referral hospitals, but they were overwhelmed. Mildred, one thing we learned during this outbreak, as I told you, it is a learning process. In the usual ICU patients, if an ICU patient is admitted, let's say after head injury or say after operations, they require about 2 big cylinders per day, such a patient. But we learned a severe critical patient requires 6 to 7 cylinders per day. And that overwhelmed the capacity of the oxygen in this country. So we are procuring oxygen plants, actually 16. Each regional referral hospital is getting a modern oxygen plant, which will produce over 12,000 cylinders per day. And the national referral hospitals, those are 3 which are getting. And then we are getting also backup in the region, 1 in the national medical stores and in 2 regions. So the oxygen capacity, we are boosting it up. By actually December, we shall have all 18 or 19 oxygen plants. There's 16 plus 3, that's 19.
19.
And then we have also recruited staff, critical care staff.
That was my key one.
Yes.
Human resource.
Because you realize that some of our staff got really tired and overwhelmed because of the big numbers. So, and they do 3 shifts. So we have to recruit more staff, especially the critical care staff, to manage ICUs and high dependency units. We are looking at specialists, physicians, anesthesiologists, intensivists, critical care nurses. We had to recruit many of those, and some on contract, some on full-time, and deploy them to all our treatment centers, the regional referral hospitals, the national referral hospitals. And then we are also putting in place capacity for evacuation of more patients, especially the ambulance facilities. We have procured more ambulances, both land and water. We are procuring 17 boat ambulances, state-of-the-art ambulances, which we have procured especially for the island districts, and over 117 road ambulances, grade B, which are modern ambulances with high-tech equipment. Further that, we are strengthening our capacity to budget for more PPE, because we have to protect our staff. We have to make sure that the national medical stores gets adequate funding to procure more equipment, personal protective equipment, because as I told you, we have 3 shifts mostly in ICU, so you have staff running for 8 hours, every 8 hours and every 8 hours. So each staff requires a PPE. And as soon as she leaves, you have to throw away that PPE, and the next team which comes have to put on new PPE. And then, so we have, and that's a very expensive adventure which we have to budget for and put in place. Of course, also the new measures at the airport, especially to test everybody who is coming in, to make sure that we don't get new variants into the country, is also one of the preparedness that we have put in place. You realize that, as I have told you, the biggest problem that we got in the second wave was the beating we got from the new variant of India. So you don't want to import another variant in the country, especially the new variants which are not yet here. So we have put in place a mechanism to make sure that we detect and test everybody who comes in.
How about the porous borders? Because the airport can be streamlined, but we have porous borders where there is free walk-in and walk-out of people.
Actually, even we are talking of the airport, but we are also talking about, before we get to the porous borders, because that is a bit more complicated, we are also talking about the other border points of entry, the land border points like Malaba, Busia, Elegu, and the like. We are also streamlining and strengthening testing there to avoid variants. Now we are working with our colleagues in the security situation, in the security sector, to make sure that they tighten the loose on the porous borders, because they have done this before. When we had Ebola in DRC, it was the security team where we were concentrating at the border points, like in Buera, down in Kisora and the rest. It was mainly the security team who took control of the border, porous borders, but also our strong community vigilance, the VHTs and the local LSCs. They also help us a lot. We don't want to underestimate their role, because the local people will tell you that so and so, such and such a person crossed in this country through this porous border. So we are also strengthening our village community engagement strategy to make sure that they assist to control those levels. Okay.
Good efforts in that direction, but throughout the steps that were taken in the second phase of the lockdown because of the numbers, and I'm coming to you, Dr. Driwale, was the introduction of the home-based care. Because in the first phase, everyone had to go to hospital. Mild, severe, or critical, you had to go to the hospital. In the second phase, because of the numbers, we introduced home-based care. How are we faring on that? And in the event of a third lockdown, how do we deal with home-based care, which in many cases was actually abused?
Yeah, it goes back to responsibility. But let me explain. In the first wave, we were expecting importation of the disease from outside.
Yes.
So the strategy was to pick any numbers of cases which came into the country and limit the numbers of people who could come into contact with them. So in that way, we would isolate everybody who is found positive and give the various types of care to them for that objective. The numbers were few, and we were having isolated cases. We went to clusters, we went to community. So as we went into the community phase of transmission, the effectiveness of isolating everybody reduced, and the numbers were many. So the strategy had to change. The strategy was to limit numbers of people who would die, people who would suffer without appropriate care. So we would pick the severe cases, those who warranted admission, and those who were asymptomatic. By the way, about 80% of the people who are infected are asymptomatic, and the numbers are large. So instead of filling the available space with this group, home-based care became the way out, and it requires self-discipline, because there are people who are found positive, you find them selling in the market.
Oh, yes.
So it means that counseling failed. The incentive you get to do the right thing is if you are conscious. But if you do not move, if you move out and you have no symptoms, then you become a public health risk. So it has challenged the control.
Would we want to rethink
disease.
it in case of another?
In terms of isolating everybody, I think in terms of isolating everybody, it would be very difficult. You could see numbers where we were identifying more than 1,000 people per day. And if you start isolating that would be a very complicated path, unless the Director General thinks so. But I think it will not be sustainable. So the way to go is those who are found positive with the disease and they have no symptoms now need to take responsibility. I don't know how many times I've used that word. Controlling this disease requires responsibility. No amount of policing, no amount of force will control it. It's awakening our consciousness that you have a contribution to make in containing the disease. If you do not do that, by the way, the immediate victims may be your family members.
Oh, yeah.
Before you take it to the others. So it is calling for, it's a higher call
Dr.
May I
Morrison,
add
that
something
responsibility
before we
seemed to
leave
fail.
that?
Yes, that
Yeah.
responsibility for home-based care seemed to fail. That I'm tested positive, and because I don't have any symptoms, I feel okay, I will go to office the next day.
Okay, let me add to that. First of all, Mildred, I think we used a strong word when we said it failed. I don't think it failed. I was seeing in our statistics here, actually out of the 124,000 cases, thereabout, 97,000, over 97,000, actually improved through home-based care. Of course, those were the mild and the moderate. He improved and were discharged from home-based care and didn't reach even our health facilities. But two, how, of course, what Alfred has said is true. You'd have somebody is sick, is admitted. A few cases. I don't want to generalize it really. You'd have a few cases, he's sick, but because he's mild, then he goes to work. If you go to a supermarket, if you go to a window. But those were a few cases, and we are now putting in place mechanism to strengthen home-based care. First of all, we are developing guidelines. We have developed guidelines which we have disseminated to all those who are under home-based care, clearly telling you the do's and the don'ts. When you are in home-based care, is what you should do, because as he says, you also have to protect even your own family. So there will be the do's and the don'ts. And it's a simple leaflet that you read. And I know many of us have had friends, relatives under home-based care. So we are cross-cutting, and we need all to encourage our colleagues, friends, relatives to adhere to the guidelines which you have said. Okay. But two, more importantly, we are strengthening the community engagement strategy. In this case, there will be a VHT member who has been trained to look after cases in his or her area or environment. So if I stay in Kamocha, these houses, I should know who is under home-based care. And then I should be checking on that patient and giving him guidelines, supporting him and telling him what to do and not what to do. And actually making sure that they don't go out and they don't just go and start disseminating. So the role of the community will be very important in making sure that those who are sick are supported within the community, and they, if it requires treatment, the VHT will even be in position to help with getting them their treatment and or buying for them their treatment, and they stay under home-based care.
Thank you very much. Getting back to the discussion about vaccination in particular, Dr. Driwale, this is a question coming in from Nkore Paul, who says, what is the way forward for those who are fully vaccinated and want to travel to, say, Europe, but you are considered unvaccinated, especially in Western Europe? I think he has tried to move. What is the correlation and discussion on vaccination across the different countries together with our partners?
Now, there's a lot of information moving on.
Oh, yeah.
And the vaccines which we are using in Uganda are the same vaccines being used in Western Europe. And the certificate you offer needs to be verified as being authentic. So before you move, we check your information, we update, and there are countries which recognize actually our certificate. And we have also gotten foreign missions here who have fully vaccinated in Uganda, and they have presented these certificates without having any problem. There are people who have presented these certificates in a number of countries, and they have been accepted. So the only thing is, if your certificate is not authentic, if you do not have the electronic one before you move, try to download it using the link. If you fail to download, you get in touch with your district health officer or even us in the ministry.
Okay.
We'll get that certificate for you.
All right.
Actually, there are many countries, especially the EU and who have been writing to us to give them sample of our certificate for recognition.
Okay.
And very many other countries in Asia, Japan and the like, have been writing to us, the Ministry of Health, to indicate the authentic certificate that we are giving for vaccination, which will be recognized. And in the same way, they have also been giving us their certificates, so for recognition of their people who come in this country holding their certificates. So there is that level of collaboration.
And that then brings in the question of, am I able to travel with just one dose of the vaccine at the end of the day, with my vaccination card, not certificate? Remember, for example, if I'm taking AstraZeneca, I'll have to take 2 jabs, but I've taken one, and in between, before the second one, I need to travel. Am I allowed, for example, at the airport to move with a card?
Of course, up to now, many countries have not yet stopped people to travel because of not full vaccination. But one jab is not considered full vaccination. So you'll be considered as somebody who is not fully vaccinated, and you'll be looked at in that context. If there are countries which are still carrying out quarantine, they'll quarantine you because you are not fully vaccinated. Okay. I have a colleague who is in the US today, this week, who is attending a course, a military course. Actually, he sent us a message yesterday. When he reached there with his full vaccination, he was accorded free status. He's even attending the lectures and the courses physically. While he has colleagues who have come from the region without full vaccination, they are only attending virtually, although they are in the US. Okay. So our certificates are being recognized as long as it is full vaccination.
Ntulume Nicholas asks, I want Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson. Which health facility should I visit? People are now choosing between the vaccines. And he's asking, Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson is his preference. Which facility should he visit? But of course, Johnson & Johnson is not yet here, but for Pfizer probably. Okay.
Johnson & Johnson is not yet here, but it will be here within a week?
It will be here on 7th.
On 7th.
7th of this month.
That's 3 days
today is
from
4th.
today. Yes.
That's end of this week.
Yes. So he can go for Pfizer. Pfizer is everywhere in Kampala, I think.
Yes, Kampala, Wakiso and Mukono.
And Mukono.
All right.
Yeah. And then if he can wait for Johnson & Johnson because he wants one jab, anytime after next week, I believe he should be able to get it.
All right. And that also brings us to the question of, while we're talking about vaccination, on the other end, there is also the testing, that especially for people who are traveling, but also for those who feel a bit of, mild cases, the alert cases that the ministry has continued to talk about. And Dr. Driwale, the president, in one of his conversations and addresses, he talked about government putting in place a facility where testing would be lowered to about $45 or less than that. Is that ready? Can we confirm to Ugandans that now at any point in time I can be able to test at a lower cost?
So may I request the Director General to respond to the testing?
Please,
question.
Go ahead.
As I told you from the beginning, we have moved a stage ahead. We have been testing 10 countries coming into the country. But because of avoiding the situation of the risk of variants, now we are going to test every arriving passengers into the country. And we are doing that through the private sector, but the government has guided that government should do the testing. So we've been making preparations to put in place a mechanism and system to test at the airport, within the airport, so that by the time a passenger leaves the airport, he has been tested and is free to go with his or her results. So the preparations are in final stages. We had to do a little modifications. The CA had to do some modifications at the airport, especially sample collection sites, because that was not a mandate of the airport or civil aviation. So such facilities were not there. So now we are putting those facilities. We are putting in place equipment, lab equipment. They had to put partitioning and cubicles where you can do the testing. And then waiting facilities for passengers to receive their results. Okay. All that facility preparation is going to be ready within the next 1 week. I think we are in advanced stages. I think our colleagues went to the airport this evening, but because we are coming here, we didn't want to go there. But it will be ready within a week. The cost is $30. I think that is user-friendly for most of the pockets of the travelers.
Okay.
So all arriving passengers will be tested at the airport. Before you leave the airport, you'll receive your results. And we are trying to cut down the time because we are trying to use the platforms which give us results in a very quick time. at least within 1.5 hours. So from the time you arrive, the sample is collected immediately you arrive before you even reach immigration. So by the time you reach immigration, your sample has been taken up to the labs, and then by the time you go through immigration, baggage control, meanwhile your sample is being run up. From there, then you walk up to waiting area where there will be facilities, internet and the rest. As you wait for another one, we know it is an inconvenience, but like the president says, this is life and death. So we'll inconvenience people by about 1 or 2 hours. Let's say 2 hours. Let's not be overambitious. I don't think people will get results in 1 hour. But let's say 2 hours. And then they'll get the results after paying $30.
Okay. And to you, Dr. Durali, this is I will take that back. This is Makuthum, who says, since 15th last month, I have tried to get a certificate, but I have failed. That also brings in the question, after my second jab, how long does it take me to get my certificate of vaccination?
So after completion of your vaccination, you get the certificate after 2 weeks.
Okay.
2 weeks, that's when you can get your certificate. We also had challenges with the link. There are a number of people who tried to download the certificates from the link, which was the EpiVac link, which was circulated. The IT teams are working on that. There were challenges, and they're working on having it resolved. I think if you are within a district headquarters, you can go directly to the technical teams to download for you the certificate, should you need it for purposes of travel or otherwise.
So you can get it physically, or you can be able to download it as well?
Yes, the best is to get it by yourself. But where you are failing, you can be assisted by your biostatistician in the district.
Okay. Dr. Mwebesa, we clearly know that COVID-19 is not an issue for Uganda or Africa alone. It is a global issue, and that means with all the information that is streaming in, people are following up on information, and that is why some probably hesitated because of some of the, conversations that were going on globally. Currently, there is a conversation of a booster vaccine, for lack of a better word, and especially for Pfizer-BioNTech, for people of above 65 years or 18 plus with pre-existing conditions. Are these conversations that the Ministry of Health is paying attention to, and what information would you give to the Ugandan in that regard?
Our scientific committee, Vaccine Advisory Committee and Scientific Committee are reviewing that. Of course, we have just started the Pfizer vaccine. Most of our clients or people who are taking Pfizer vaccine have just taken it. So I don't think that should be a worry for them, because many of them have taken. I don't think we have people who have taken even a second dose yet. The other day they were telling us 10 people have taken a second dose.
Okay.
But I want to believe those are people who came from outside. Yeah. They had taken their first dose outside, and therefore they were due for their second dose after 1 month. For the team who got their first dose in Uganda, I believe we haven't even got the second dose. There are discussions that there may be need for a booster dose after 6 months or something like that, but in those countries which have been using the Pfizer vaccine so far. But our scientific advisory committee is reviewing that, and the vaccine advisory committee, they will advise us accordingly, and we shall adopt through their guidance and recommendation.
All right. Now, that takes us back to the discussion about a potential third wave as well in that regard. What do we need to do to avert that? You talked about the standard operating procedures, but like I said, as time passes by with the reopening of the economy, people could potentially forget. How far is the Ministry of Health prepared to make sure that we do not slip into a third wave?
Maybe let me put this straight. The Ministry of Health passes messages and developed SOPs as the mainstream way of preventing the disease. And in that way, the ball is passed over to individuals. And that is what the strongest instrument we have about averting the third wave. I think that should not get off our mind. That is the instrument. Now, if that line of defense breaks, if that protection breaks, the next thing is the Ministry of Health will prepare itself to manage the sick. If the protection fails, the next is to manage the sick. And Dr. Mwebesa has elaborated how we are preparing ourselves to manage the sick in anticipation. The ICU beds, the oxygen capacity, these are things we don't need, but we are preparing ourselves. And then the guidelines for the home-based care, for those who will be sick and who are going to be asymptomatic or mild disease, they will be under home care. So we are preparing ourselves. Then the vaccines are also being given to detooth the epidemic. You see, if the vulnerable people are protected, then the pandemic will be like a dog without teeth. It can bark and it cannot bite. So we want to protect the vulnerable so that if we have the epidemic, it doesn't result into what we had explained earlier. Numbers of people who need to be admitted because they are severely ill. So for those who are in these categories, high-risk categories, they should take the vaccines seriously. And if you are associated with anybody who has high risk, an underlying health condition, diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer, lung disease, heart disease, it is your responsibility to mobilize those people and have them vaccinated, because they are the ones who are going to bear the biggest brand. Of course, we are talking about 50 and above. We have also seen people who are younger than that. So what we are speaking here is public health. We are talking about in terms of majority. Actually, our national statistics shows no age group is safe. All age groups are at risk of severe disease and death. What we are talking about, the age groups and the underlying health conditions, is just the relative risk. That the risk increases as you have those conditions. So third wave preparation starts with us, adherence to SOPs. There's no alternative to it. While the health sector is preparing to manage the sick, which is not a desirable situation. And also for us, we are encouraging vaccination of the vulnerable groups so that it does not result into death, severe disease, and congestion in our healthcare institutions. Okay. That is the trajectory.
All right, that now takes me back still to the aspect of vaccination as we prepare for the third wave. At the height of it all, of course, there was the whole idea of concoctions. People were talking about steaming. There was a lot of information that was flowing through. And also that brings us, which also Dr. Mwebesa will answer, to the discussion about COVIDX, which one of our anchors as well did talk about. Are you looping all this into the conversations ahead of whatever may come in the future?
So the COVID-19 disease creates complications in the lung, which eventually block your airways and air entry becomes a problem. A number of these concoctions help in relieving symptoms. And if your lung is congested and you take a remedy which allows you to breathe better, I think that is worthwhile. And most of the concoctions are in that group. But in terms of cure, these are concoctions, particularly COVIDX, Covilis, which are our own products, are under clinical trials to be sure that they have the efficacy which is required and they pass all the scientific tests. So this is an ongoing work. But symptom relief and is what anecdotally we have proved beyond doubt has helped people.
All right. Dr. Mwebesa, you will as well highlight on issues of information overload, for lack of a better word. Everyone at some point in time had information on how to deal with COVID-19, be it symptoms or the disease itself. And how do you, as the ministry, treat this to come out timely to make sure that you give the rightful information?
True, there's a lot of information, especially through the social media and people Googling and finding out everything. Everywhere, even reach at home, you find your children even know more than you because they have studied this, they have read this, they have read that. They are even asking you things you haven't read about yourself, but they are ahead of you. So that is true. This is a new disease. All of us are in the learning phase, but we try to get as much information as we can. And we're using our department. We try to disseminate the correct information as much as possible. Of course, unfortunately, some of the information is misleading, misinformation, and we try to correct that information through social media, through press like you. Our team, public relations, is always giving press briefings every Thursday. The important thing is to give people information as much as possible, and to make sure sometimes you have to correct the wrong information that has been thrown out there. You have to assure the people and give them the correct information. So the bottom line is we have even prepared frequently asked questions. We have made booklets of most frequently asked questions. So we give information as much as possible. But more importantly, also to correct the myths and misinformation, but also to make sure that people know a lot more about what is correct. Even being guided by Scientific Advisory Committee, which is run by most of our scientists from Makerere and the university. But I wanted to add on the issue of innovations. The innovations are very important. And I think it's important that we allow them to go on. Most of these innovations, of course, people know of COVID-19, that's what has marketed itself so much. But there are many more innovations, and they are good and they are important. There's the innovation of Ngulu University. We have our natural chemotherapeutics. They are also having, I think it was even launched by the president. It is now at the clinical trials, and analysis is being done. So a lot is being done locally in terms of care. But I also want to remind people that we are also developing our own vaccines. It is vaccine in the country. It is a different level of development in a different phase. So we are also moving on. We are not seated. The whole world is developing vaccines, trying to develop vaccines. People are at different stages. I think there are over 200 trials. We are among them. I think we are in the phase 1. And we shall get there. Maybe one day we'll not need to require this long competition of bidding and waiting for COVAX to get us what to buy. We shall manufacture ours here in Uganda. So the innovations are there, and they are doing a good work, and they are updating us regularly. So the innovations are very important, and they need to be supported. Unfortunately, government is supporting them. Most of these innovations actually are funded purely by government. There's no donor funding any of these innovations.
Okay. Well, our time is really fast spent. We need to get this done. But probably before we go into the closing remarks, Dr. Driwale, one is asking, I think that's from Aturo, who is asking, I took my first jab. Unfortunately, I got COVID-19 once again because, like we've clearly said, vaccination does not protect you from getting the disease, but rather protecting you from the adverse effects. After recovery, do I need to take my 2 jabs again, or do I just take the last jab that I had to take?
Now, after the infection, he has to count 3 months and he gets his last jab.
Okay. So you don't need to go back and take the 2 jabs at all?
No. He got the first one, he got infected, then he now gets his last.
Okay. And to you, Dr. Mwebesa, this one is coming in from Mark, who asks that at what cost? You've talked about 1.2 million vaccines of Johnson & Johnson. At what cost of the taxpayers' money are we receiving the 1.2 Johnson & Johnson vaccines?
How much? You can help.
Okay.
The per dose of Johnson & Johnson.
Per dose, it will arrive to Uganda at 8.9 $8.9.
Okay.
Yeah.
To arrival to Uganda, and that's
Uganda.
a full dose kit.
That's a full dose.
So I think,
And I think you need also to emphasize that we are getting it through the African Union.
Yes.
That
So-
was an arrangement which was made for countries in
Yes.
Africa through the African Union.
Yes. So we run 3 portfolios. There is a portfolio where we get vaccines through the African Union, and the vaccines we'll get is Johnson & Johnson. It will come to us at $8.9.
okay.
In addition to other things. The official figure is 7.5, but there are other costs associated, which takes it to 8.9.
Okay.
And then we also have another portfolio of vaccines which we will get through COVAX, which we are buying. And the vaccine will be Sinopharm, and we will expect to get 18 million doses for 9 million people. So that covers 18 million people who will be getting vaccines which are purchased by government of Uganda. Then we have commitments from the COVAX facility, which is a global facility which supports countries with vaccines. And it comes to us in form of donations. And this portfolio is the one which has been working since March up to now. And we are performing well on that portfolio, although in smaller bits, but it is a progress which we are making.
All right.
Right.
Well, our time is really fast spent. The discussion is interesting, and we can follow up and continue, of course, tagging the Ministry of Health to answer some of the questions that probably may not have gotten the time to be answered. We need to wrap up this, and I'll start off with you, Dr. Driwale, for your closing remarks.
So I want to thank NBS for its persistence in supporting the campaign for COVID-19 vaccination. And I also want to thank the judiciary, the parliament, the executive, for having come out, and the religious groups and other corporates for having come up to take vaccines publicly and give confidence. And the journey from March up to now is now stronger than before. More people have faith in vaccines, and there are now testimonies, and we have our own national information, which says that of 1,400 people who were admitted with COVID-19, none of those who was fully vaccinated died. And I think the evidence, the local evidence that vaccines work is now here.
Okay.
And we also have additional information that if you get one vaccine, that journey is better than not getting a vaccine at all.
One dose.
One dose, it's better than not getting any vaccine at all, because it halves your risk of dying because of severe disease.
Okay.
So we now have homegrown evidence to the benefit of vaccines, and now we can speak with more confidence because the evidence is in our hands.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Alfred Driwale. And we'll have final closing remarks from Dr. Henry Mwebesa.
I think let me also start by adding to thanking all those who have supported us in this program, starting with you, the media. You have really done a very commendable job in disseminating the information, in calling the people to come and get vaccinated. Likewise, the community leaders, the religious leaders, His Excellency the President and government in general. And actually even, what do we call them? The stars, because we have also had the stars who have come out to...
Celebrities?
The celebrities. That's the word I was looking for. The celebrities who have come out to promote vaccination, including the religious and cultural leaders. So I really want to thank them most sincerely and call on them to continue with the same drive, to continue giving confidence to our people, to continue guiding them, and continue reassuring them that the vaccine is safe, We shall continue talking as the technical people, but we also want their backup to mobilize the people. The vaccine is safe. The vaccine is free. I want to discourage people who are looking for vaccines to buy, or those who are looking for comfort being vaccinated in their offices. You'll be vaccinated water like happened here recently. Please avoid that scenario.
And the private facilities have been asking when can they be given the leeway to have their own vaccines, and at will, if I need to pay for the vaccination.
I think for
I go
now,
and do
government
that.
is bringing in enough vaccines for the 22 million people. I think let's concentrate on that. Because we had even cleared some private enterprises to bring vaccines. I've not seen a single dose of vaccine which has arrived.
Okay.
I remember the first company we cleared was in May. I've not seen a dose which has arrived here.
Okay.
So, but what I want to say is that the vaccines are safe. They should come and take vaccines. I was emphasizing the point that people should avoid the issue of saying they want to pay for vaccine and come and be vaccinated. You may be vaccinated water, or if you are vaccinated, then people may be stealing the government vaccines and to come and vaccinate you. So please don't facilitate malpractices, because that would mean somebody has stolen that vaccine from somewhere to come and vaccinate you in your comfort of your house or your home. Let's use the facilities provided by government to get vaccinated. The vaccine does not cause the disease, so I want to reassure people, come and take the vaccine, it is safe. You need to complete your vaccination. If you have done the first dose, make sure you take your second dose, unless you go to Johnson & Johnson, which is 1 dose. But if you have taken AstraZeneca, you need to come back after 3 months. If you have taken Pfizer, you need to come back after 4 weeks, that's 1 month. If you have taken Sinopharm or Sinovac, 1 month, you come back for your second dose. And the other one is the
Moderna?
Moderna. If you have taken Moderna, I think Moderna is also 1 month.
Yeah.
1 month. So please complete your vaccination. But as we have said time and again, even when you are vaccinated, please try to follow SOPs, because you can still get the COVID and you can still transmit it. So still follow the SOPs and make sure that you protect yourself, you protect your family, you protect your loved ones. The vaccine is to make sure that you don't get the severe and critical condition, you don't overwhelm our system, you don't end up in Mulago, because you'll end up in Mulago and you'll find Mulago full. If I want to emphasize this, that you've been asking about what we should do to avoid the third phase. We should avoid the third phase.
Okay.
Because you'll end up in Mulago, you'll find Mulago full, and then you'll run to private facilities, then you'll be overcharged, you'll end up with bills 150 million. That was a better period. I don't want to see that situation again. Let's avoid that situation. It was very traumatic and it was very debilitating, and I don't want to see us go through that again. So the only solution is to avoid the third phase.
All right. Thank you very much. Dr. Henry Jim Webesa, who is the Director General Health Services, and also Dr. Alfred Druali, the Assistant Commissioner Health Services, Vaccines and Immunization. It's been a pleasure having you gentlemen on Spotlight UG, shining the light on a number of issues with regard to Uganda's vaccination program. The vaccines are free and safe and protect you not from COVID-19, but from the adverse effects of COVID-19. And at least, particularly if you can forget anything else, do not forget that on the 7th, which is just a few days, 3 days from now, we'll be receiving 1.2 million doses of Johnson & Johnson, and those you need only 1 dose, and you will be done. We are looking at 4.8 million people who will be vaccinated by at least end of December. One clear issue as well is the third wave is imminent. Now, the choice is yours to make sure that we stop that from coming to pass, or if you don't adhere to the standard operating procedures, we may as well slip back into the situation we were a few months ago. The choice is yours, like I said. Thank you so much for joining us on Spotlight UG. Let's continue with the discussion there. The hashtag is Spotlight UG. From the entire crew and myself, Mildred Tohaise, I want to say a good morning to you because it's already Tuesday, and God bless you.
I smile when I think of you, Uganda, my home. My home, I dance when I look at you, Uganda, my home, oh my Uganda.
I know with you I'll always stay for